Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We'll get started in a minute or two. Welcome, everyone. See, more and more people are joining. Thank you. Hello, all. We'll start in just a minute. We have more people joining. And I think we will get started now. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the North Central Plan 2020 Virtual Community-Wide Town Hall Meeting. My name is Lorna Godwin of Vector Communications, and I am pleased to be your moderator this evening. Tonight's webinar is the third community-wide town hall for the North Central Plan. If you have attended one of our previous meetings, we thank you for being here again tonight. Last summer, the Covenant Blue Grand Center and Vanderventer neighborhoods came together and began envisioning a 20-year community plan. This plan is designed to highlight the assets of the community and build on its existing strengths. Tonight, we are here to continue the conversation and get more of your feedback. The purpose of tonight's virtual meeting is for you to hear from the planning team the draft principles and strategies and how they support the goals, vision, and core values that were presented at last November's town hall meeting. You also will hear a presentation of the preferred neighborhood option. After both presentations, we will ask you to provide your feedback and input to be incorporated into the plan. When the meeting is over, you will have an additional opportunity to provide feedback on the principles and strategies, and that address is at www.surveymonkey.com/r/NCP strategies. The link will be on the website. Well, we are meeting virtually tonight, and you know why, because of COVID-19. During this meeting, all of you are on mute, so everyone can hear clearly. If you have a question, please click on the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and send your question or comment to Q&A. When it comes time to answer questions, I will read them out loud, and then our team members will answer your questions. Since there are quite a few of us on the call, we ask that you remain muted and submit your questions, please, through the chat box only. Well, now that we have all that virtual meeting protocol out of the way, I will turn the meeting over to Tim Brehan of H3 Studio Inc. to present the draft principles and strategies. Now, while Tim is presenting, please feel free to write your questions and comments in the chat box. You do not have to wait until he finishes his presentation. Tim, take it away.
Thank you, Lorna, and thank you everyone for being here tonight. So what we'd like to do tonight, as Lorna was mentioning, is to take you through the strategies and principles for the plan. And as well as the preferred option. And we want to try to pick up where we left off back in November, when we asked you all to provide input to us on the values, vision, and goals for the North Central Plan. We got a lot of great feedback from our participants in that meeting, both in person and virtually. And working with the Project Steering Committee, we've developed the draft community vision statement, which is really focusing on the North Central Plan area as a whole, healthy and vibrant community, celebrating your distinctive neighborhoods, housing, and all of the various institutions, religious, cultural, and educational amenities that exist in the area. And thinking about how we can really make this a well-maintained, safe, and inclusive home for all residents and businesses and institutions. This plan really recognizes and builds upon your central location that's well connected to all areas of the city. And we really want to ensure moving forward that this plan and its implementation are led by the people who call this area home, and that the plan will continue to provide equal support to residents and stakeholders to be able to thrive and chart their own future in the community now and in the future. The plan and the planning process is really supported by the core value statements that you all were so instrumental in helping us to craft, because this is really what you've articulated to us that you as residents and as the community value, that everyone has the opportunity to thrive in place and in a multi-generational community, that everyone is respected and provided equal consideration, that you as the community make decisions with transparency and provide forums and venues for all residents and stakeholders to participate, that you as the community share the responsibility for improving the North Central neighborhood and implementing the plan, and that you're stewards of your environment and of your community today and for future generations. Based upon the input that you all provided at our last meeting, we've developed 12 goals that this plan seeks to achieve. And we're going to talk about the particulars of these and how these are beginning to make themselves apparent in the plan and in the recommendations for the neighborhood's future. But I'll quickly run through these goals, because these were really what you told us you want this neighborhood to be and how you want to get there. So goal number 1, respect, celebrate, and build upon the diverse history of North Central. Goal number 2, create whole, healthy, and vibrant neighborhoods. Goal number 3, rehab existing homes and provide a diversity of new infill homes. Goal number 4, support and assist North Central residents to remain in place and build wealth and social capital. Goal number 5, promote and support the creation and retention of viable community businesses and creative arts industries and promote entrepreneurship. Goal number 6, connect and engage residents of all ages to sustainable employment and community services. Goal 7, attract and provide access to high quality recreational, educational, health, and cultural amenities and programs. Goal number 8, improve neighborhood safety for all residents and visitors. Goal 9, improve and enhance public infrastructure and public services. Goal 10, establish clear communication and accountability with the City of St. Louis. Goal 11, create a participatory decision-making process for residents to guide the future of the community. And goal 12, ensure a just, equitable, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable future for the North Central community. So these are certainly very aspirational goals and goals that are really very relevant to the existing conditions and future vision for the neighborhood. Now the question is, how do we get there? How do we begin to achieve these goals? And that leads us into the first part of our presentation tonight, which is the North Central Plan principles and strategies. So what are principles and strategies anyway? Well, Principles are the essential recommendations to achieve each of the plan's goals. And strategies are the specific activities or actions that the community can take, both as an entity in and of itself, or in partnership with the city and with other entities in the area. So as an example, if we look at our third goal, which is rehab existing homes and provide a diversity of new infill homes, one principle that could support that goal would be to connect local developers with rehab opportunities. And there are a couple of specific strategies that could help to make that a reality. So one strategy could be to compile a list of vacant or derelict buildings suitable for rehab. A second strategy could be to provide local developer education on acquiring LRA properties for redevelopment. A third strategy, provide local developer education on city, state, and federal incentives and resources. So the strategies can be very specific, and in fact, they work best when they are specific, because these are really the tools by which the community and its partners and your partners can begin to implement the plan from day one. And so what we would like to ask you to do as part of this stage of the project, as Lorna had mentioned, is we'd like you to visit that web link, www.surveymonkey.com/r/ncp strategies. And when you go there, you'll find a tool where each of the community goals for the North Central Plan is listed, as well as principles under each of those goals. And you'll have the opportunity to input into that web page specific strategies, activities that can be done to achieve each of those principles. So if we were meeting in person, we would like to do this as kind of an in-person exercise, but unfortunately, because we can't do that, we have the web tool, which is a good substitute. And we've used this web tool with the steering committee already and gotten feedback from steering committee members. And now we'd like to get feedback from you all as the residents of the neighborhood. So we'd ask you to please put down all of your ideas, access the website, put down all of your ideas of how to make the neighborhood even better. And it's important that even if you think those ideas might be too hard or too unrealistic, too expensive, please put them down anyway. We can always go through and edit and make things feasible. But right now, it's important to get all of your ideas to understand the full scope, because you as residents are the experts in this area. You know much more than we'll ever know from just having worked here. And the more specific, the better. So please let us know if there are, particular properties, particular areas that need attention. If you know of particular partners in the neighborhood, or even, a resident who owns a lawn care business who would be willing to help mow vacant lots, nothing is off the table. We really want to get a full understanding of all of the opportunities that are available and begin to use those to develop those specific tools to help make this plan a reality. So with that said, I'd like to pass it back to Lorna for a bit to take some questions on the principles and strategies before we move on to the next portion of our presentation. Oh, Lorna, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Happens once a day. As I was saying, if you have any questions about the principles and strategies, please write them in the chat room now. And to just remind you of how this works is that the planning team presented draft principles and strategies and the goals. And then the steering committee gave their input, we incorporated their input, and now we're presenting it to you, the community, for your input. And then we'll take all of that and put it together. So there are 12 goals, there are several principles, and we need your strategies, your ideas, your activities for how we can satisfy each of the principles and the goals. And as Tim said, you know the community better than all of us on the planning consulting team do. So that's why we need your input. I don't see any questions at this time, Tim, so that means you explained it very well. And that people want to get busy and get to that survey monkey and give us their input. But again, if you, here's a question that just came in. So before we go to the next one, are the strategies supposed to be long-term or short-term strategies, or can they be both, Tim?
They can be both. And in fact, having a good mix of long-term and short-term is the best, because there's things that we'd like to identify that can be done the day the plan is finished, maybe even next week before the plan is finished. And there are other things that will take longer, but are no less important. So any ideas, short-term, medium-term, long-term, they're all important.
And don't just put down all of your ideas and let the team go through them. Don't edit yourself, because any idea, an idea you may have may be the greatest idea to grow this area. So don't think it's not a good idea. If you have an idea, write it down. Here's another question, Tim. It's about gentrification. In accomplishing the 12 goals, how do we prevent gentrification of our low-income residents, which has been something that we have discussed?
Absolutely. So there are a number of ways to prevent that from happening. And one of the key causes of that is, particularly for homeowners, is when you own a home that's paid off, you've lived there for a long time, and suddenly your property taxes are going up and up and up because the neighborhood's improving. There are ways, there are tools that we can work with the city and other entities to help prevent that. It's generally referred to as kind of inclusionary zoning practices, whereby you limit things like property tax increases for certain segments of the population in order to help to prevent that from happening. It's also important, though, that to remember that in addition to avoiding that undesired outcome, that if you are a homeowner, your biggest asset, your biggest source of wealth is your home, and certainly helping to improve home values, property values, can also be a tool, even though there are sometimes the risks of unintended consequences with things like property tax increases. But we are very sensitive to that issue. And we, as we work through this process, particularly interfacing with the city and beginning to develop the implementation recommendations, we're going to be looking at a wide range of tools to put into the plan that will mitigate or eliminate those unintended negative effects for residents.
Thank you. This next question is about partnerships. What kind of partnerships should we think about working with to create the strategies, like city, local groups, neighbors? What types of partners?
Again, really, it can be anyone. Partnerships with the city are important. As you probably know, though, the city has limited resources and a large area that they have to spend them, and so we want to ensure that we're not only looking at partnerships with the city of St. Louis. Partnerships with institutions can be very important, and it's interesting to think, for instance, of how different goals relate to some of the strengths that are currently in the community. And we'll be getting into that in the framework plan. But for instance, we've heard a lot about job readiness and making sure that people have the right training so they can access high-paying jobs with and build sustainable incomes as residents of the neighborhood. And you have a great resource with Rankin that provides a lot of those types of training programs. So what are possible partnership opportunities for that? Thinking of developing entrepreneurship resources, business incubators, kind of hands-on, beyond like formal educational training, hands-on trade development. We've heard things about like a community auto repair shop where people can learn those skills, or community kitchens where people can learn to cook. Thinking of partnerships with the Arts District and Grand Center. They're really, it's really endless. When you think of providing health resources, partnerships with local healthcare providers, St. Louis University, the Veterans Administration. So there are lots of ways in which those partnerships can occur. We know, or we have ideas about some of them based on our research, but we're sure that you all as residents know things about the community that we don't know. Things that are located in the community, churches that have these programs, other resources. So as much information as you can provide to us as the planning team to begin to build out these potential relationships is really instrumental in creating a successful plan.
Thank you. So Tim, those are all the questions we have right now regarding the principles and strategies. And again, we hope that you will go to our website at www.surveymonkey.com/r/NCP strategies. And please share your ideas with us. You know what, Tim? Another question just came in. So it's you and me, let's take it.
Sure.
And it's about crime. What about crime prevention? People need to feel reasonably safe to invest time, money, rehab and new construction projects. People with resources have to stay in the community.
That's very true. And this is probably one of the top issues and opportunities for improvement that we've heard throughout the process so far. And so, again, I think this is an opportunity for a comprehensive and multifaceted approach. So one of the things that we've heard about, for instance, that is a big issue in the neighborhood is traffic and street safety. People speeding, people running stop signs, not having adequate sidewalks, continuous sidewalks. People don't feel safe walking. We've obviously heard negative feedback about property crime and burglaries and robberies, and all of the typical activities that and issues that city neighborhoods tend to face. So thinking of partnership opportunities, there are some obvious ones with enforcement through partnering with the police department, partnering with the city to do traffic calming and those sorts of enforcement activities. Those are kind of well-worn approaches, but are there opportunities, for instance, for more community-based preventative measures, mentorship opportunities for youth programming to sort of put people on the right track and keep them out of undesirable behaviors in the first place. So again, these are areas where you as residents will know some of the opportunities that can be built upon, and so we will be very pleased to get that feedback from you all in order to understand how these relationships and partnerships can be built out to address some of these issues.
Thank you. So now We're going to move to Tim. You're describing the draft preferred option. But again, if you have questions about the principles and strategies as you continue to hear more, you can add them along with your questions regarding the draft preferred option that Tim is about to present. So Tim, back to you.
Great, thank you. Thank you again, Lorna. So we're going to take you through the framework plan preferred option, and we have a lot of information to cover. So we may well break a few times during the discussion, particularly if lots of questions are coming in. But fundamentally, what we're going to show you tonight, it reflects the core the values, the core vision, the goals, and the principles and strategies. So we're beginning to look at ways that these plan components that we've gotten input on so far can be brought to bear in terms of actual revitalization improvements in the planning area. And this also utilizes the baseline analysis of neighborhood community and community input to address the particular physical challenges and opportunities in the neighborhood. And finally, this has been developed through an iterative engagement process with the steering committee that integrates their feedback. We met with them in early December, and we presented 3 options, got feedback from the group, and have now incorporated that feedback and developed a preferred option based on that. So this has been not only developed with a good base of feedback, but has also been vetted by the steering committee. So just to start out with kind of a quick reminder, we are dealing with 2 separate neighborhoods. The North Central Plan area covers the Vandevenner and the Covenant Blue Grand Center neighborhood. And you know, the 2 neighborhoods are similar in size. They're very different in population, and they have a very different physical characteristic. Vandevenner is primarily a residential neighborhood. It unfortunately has a lot of vacancy. Covenant Blue Grand Center is primarily characterized by the institutional presence of the Grand Center Arts District. There are, you know, portions of it which are residential, but the 2 neighborhoods each have their own unique challenges and their own unique characteristics. What's sort of interesting, though, as we think about it, you basically have kind of what we would call a 10-minute walking neighborhood. So each of these neighborhoods, you can walk from one side to the other in about 10 minutes or less. And that's a really good scale of neighborhood because it means that really almost any part of the neighborhood is accessible from any place else. Now, there are some challenges with that. There are issues of topography. There are issues of very long blocks. And so, you know, there are some difficulties, but the overall size and scale of these 2 neighborhoods next to one another and the way in which they interface, it really sets this up for a very successful revitalization. You know, these neighborhoods just have good bones. When we think of the land use characteristics in the neighborhoods, again, in many ways, the identity of this area, these 2 neighborhoods together, is really defined by the civic and community land use. Not only do you have the core of Grand Center on the eastern side, but you have St. Louis University to the south, Rankin to the east, and you have a number of really significant churches, schools, and other kind of smaller institutions spread throughout. It's a really interesting framework for community development. There's a mixed use district that is really an extension of Midtown, sort of coming into the neighborhood from the east. And you have some key commercial corridors, primarily Martin Luther King Drive, Vandevenner, and North Sarah. And within this framework, you have kind of the residential fabric of the neighborhood. And again, it varies from area to area, And when you think of this as a unit, and you think of the residential buildings and lots, from Van de Venner to Covenant Blue Grand Center, there are a number of different kind of sub-districts within that area. But what's interesting is this is one of the greatest opportunities for revitalization. But when you look at the residential vacancy, particularly when you look at the area west of Grand Boulevard, over a quarter of the residential area, about 94 acres, is actually vacant lots. And so this is clearly a major challenge to deal with, but it also provides some interesting opportunities. So when we began to think of how to address this, and working through with the steering committee, we basically developed three options that took different overall approaches to both leveraging and capitalizing on the strengths of the neighborhood, as well as addressing some of the challenges and opportunities within the neighborhood. We had a scenario, what we called the full build-out scenario, which was really framed around increasing density through new housing. We had scenario 2, which was about creating a very extensive kind of interconnected network of parks. And we had scenario 3, which really looked at the neighborhood as kind of a series of districts. And the steering committee provided a lot of really insightful feedback on the three options, both positive and negative. Looking at issues of bringing more households into the neighborhood, which increases the market for commercial amenities, but then balancing that with what kind of housing will be built, what sort of density is appropriate, how does significantly increasing the number of housing units impact the general quality of the neighborhood. There's a great acknowledgement that parks are very important, particularly African American communities north of Del Mar have generally lack park space compared to other parts of the city. But understanding how do these get built, who pays for them, who buys the land, who pays for the maintenance. And then in terms of the districts, an acknowledgement that yes, this neighborhood, this planning area has a lot of different characteristics, and building upon the strengths of each of those and the history is important, but it's important as well that the whole area is connected and has an identity to it as a place. So there was good recognition by the steering committee that each of these options had merits and had challenges, and so we took that feedback and we basically integrated it into the preferred the framework plan preferred option, utilizing this principle of a community asset building and development approach, which states that we really want to build upon the assets in the neighborhood that increase the opportunity and capacity of residents to improve their quality of life and revitalize both the physical and social aspects of the neighborhood. And the three kind of categories of assets are the institutional and community anchors, the residential core, and then the residents themselves, you all. It's interesting because in our early engagement, whenever we asked people to tell us what the best things about the neighborhood were, the residents, the neighbors, that was always one of the top responses. So that's really important. So we began to think about how these things could be built up to create a particular and achievable, actionable revitalization plan for North Central. And so starting with the community, institutional and community anchors, which are clearly very important, we thought that we needed to really start by leveraging the educational anchors right outside of the neighborhood, adjacent to the neighborhood, because these anchors provide a lot of potential resources and partnership opportunities for a lot of the goals and strategies that have been identified. Then, of course, the Arts District, the Grand Center, is probably, one of the most regionally identifiable parts of this area. So growing the Arts District and really thinking about ways in which we can encourage and work with Grand Center to better engage with the neighborhood as a whole and sort of build to its edges and really become an interconnected part of this whole area. And then beginning to connect Grand Center with the Midtown Warehouse District, which is another up and coming area with a lot of opportunities that can positively influence this. And then beginning to strategically infill the Arts District broadly with a variety of arts, commercial, retail, and mixed use housing amenities. So this provides kind of an important engine, if you will, for revitalization within the area. Then moving north, there's a remarkable opportunity when we think of the Veterans Administration Hospital, St. Louis Public Schools, and the Housing Authority, as well as institutions like St. Alphonsus Church and other smaller institutions within this area, to create what we are calling a wellness district. And wellness districts are an interesting concept for community development, where community development investments are really targeted to improve health outcomes. And one of the key pieces of feedback that we've received throughout the process is that residents in this area need better access to high quality health care. I think that's something that's true of lots of places in the city more broadly, but there are some really great opportunities here, not only with the VA hospital as a location, but they have a partnership with SLU. SLU is just just on the other side of Olive, and so really beginning to think about how that partnership can be made, and how we can partner with these institutions to help make health-oriented community improvements and community development initiatives within this district. One of the other, so looking at those partnerships with key institutions, but also thinking about how the St. Louis Housing Authority can potentially play a role to begin to provide diverse housing opportunities. The project that we were just showing in Stamford, Connecticut, they have also partnered with their local housing authority to provide housing opportunities for at-risk populations. And in this area, given the Veterans Hospital, providing housing opportunities for veterans, for instance, would be a one potential program opportunity. And then beginning to look at how the wellness district itself is really reconnected and integrated with both Grand Center and the adjacent neighborhood, so that this becomes kind of an integrated district and very desirable sub neighborhood within the planning area for people to live and work. And then looking at some of the community shopping and community service amenities, there are two kind of key community shopping centers that can really be built upon and strengthened as amenities within the community. You have the Lindell Marketplace development on Lindell, which has a Schnucks that serves many neighborhoods in the city. You have the MLK Plaza at MLK and Grand, which also has a grocery store, a Save-A-Lot, a CVS pharmacy, and a bank. And so thinking about how these retail centers can be strengthened to provide the necessary retail and service amenities that a community needs. How we can connect to the adjacent parks and schools within these broader areas. And then thinking about particularly at Grand and MLK and Cass, thinking about how much of this vacant land that surrounds this area could be then redeveloped and infilled to really create a much more vibrant and better functioning district that is really, really becomes a service core, community service and shopping core for the neighborhood more broadly through strategic infill opportunities. So when we think of these kind of big ideas of the institutional and community anchors, what this begins to do is it sets up a kind of a major mixed use development and revitalization strategy for the portions of the neighborhood that are east of North Sarah, what is traditionally thought of as kind of the Grand Corridor or Grand Center area. And then you move into the residential core, which is the rest of the neighborhood, the areas west of North Spring, which really comprise a kind of completely different residential fabric, but is probably the areas that most residents think of when they think of this area broadly, because it's where most of you live. And so addressing the residential core is actually in some ways a challenge, because the question is who leads the investment here? Who leads the implementation of the plan? And so we think that as probably the most important key recommendation coming out of this plan is the establishment of a community development organization that really organizes the neighborhood for successful implementation. Right now, the neighborhood is well positioned in the context of a number of key institutional players who have indicated that they have an interest in making this whole area work and making this area be successful and making this area be a beautiful place to work and live. But the opportunity for the community, for the residents to begin to have a voice in that process and to actually help to guide that process and facilitate that process through a community development organization is very important. There are smaller organizations that have operated more piecemeal in this area in the past. There are existing organizations like the North Newstead CDC, which partially overlap this area. But it's really important that as we think of successfully implementing this plan, that there is a community-based development organization or CDC that's established for the whole of the residential part of the area that really owns the plan and leads the implementation. And in addition, there's the opportunity for that group to identify funding sources, both for operational costs, but also over the long term, to identify funding sources for particular projects. And the reason that this is important is it means that the community isn't just reliant on a developer coming in from the outside or the city doing a project in the neighborhood, but rather the community itself can become a generator for these projects and can actually initiate projects and complete projects through a well-organized community development organization. And some examples of this in the St. Louis area that you might be familiar with, and these aren't all, these all don't have 100% relevance to this particular community, but organizations like Park Central Development in the 17th Ward, in the Grove area, or the Skinker de Bolivar Community Council in the Skinker de Bolivar neighborhood. These are community development organizations that have been very successful in setting up programs for community improvement and revitalization, which can even include development and creation of new projects, new housing, infrastructure improvements, et cetera. Within that, then, once you're organized for successful implementation, the question is, how do we begin to conceive of the improvements? So one of the interesting things about this area is that there are some emerging and really very nice existing corridors and districts. So thinking of North Vandevenner, which has a number of educational facilities, as well as that commercial node that's part of the North Sarah development, strengthening and improving that. Supporting implementation of the Hodiamont and Brickline greenways, which really have the potential and I think will become major amenities that bring regional visitors through this area. Improving North Sarah Street, both its commercial district and Turner Park, as well as its connection north to the Ville and south to Lindell Marketplace. Sarah is just a really great street with a lot of opportunities because it does connect these historic neighborhoods, and it connects to not only sort of key cultural and historic amenities, but also to some of the major commercial amenities that support this area. Then looking at partnering with neighborhood churches and schools for programs and facilities. So one of the opportunities that is present in a plan like this is that you don't have to build everything new. We've heard, for instance, that there's a desire for increased youth programming, athletic facilities, various senior facilities, an idea for a community center. In many cases, there are existing institutions that already provide some of these, but maybe they don't provide them on a comprehensive level. So a great partnership opportunity would be to actually work with those organizations, those institutions, to begin to build these programs and make them more accessible and available to residents. So this begins to set up kind of the commercial and institutional framework of the residential portion of the neighborhood. And it begins to outline then the strategy of sort of how do we work in between this to address some of the opportunities for residential development. And we've looked at the area based on the existing conditions analysis that we were showing you earlier, with kind of three general strategies. So the first strategy is the revitalization strategy, and we call that revitalize areas of strength. So what we've done is we've looked at areas, particular streets and blocks, where you already have a pretty good concentration of existing housing stock. You don't have a lot of vacancy. You have some vacant lots here and there. You certainly have some rehab opportunities for houses, but the existing neighborhood fabric is pretty intact. So thinking of streets like Enright, portions of Finney, Page Boulevard, there are a number of areas where you already have good housing stock, either historic or projects that have been done in the last 10 to 15 years. So thinking about how to rehab existing homes and strategically infill those areas with compatible housing types is really the key to the revitalization strategy. And then improving those streets with walkability, streetscape projects, really beautifying and improving the public space of the street. So sidewalks, tree lawns, street trees, crosswalks. These are things that not only do they make the neighborhood more visually attractive, but they make the neighborhood safer. They make the neighborhood more comfortable for pedestrians and cyclists. They slow traffic. So thinking of those key streets and making those infrastructure improvements to those key streets to support support the infill and development of housing. Then we have what we're calling the rebuild strategy, rebuilding areas of opportunity. So these are areas that are characterized by much higher levels of vacancy or buildings that are in poor condition. Portions, for instance, of Bell Avenue, Evans on the north side of the neighborhood, Cook Avenue. You know, these are areas where a lot of that historic fabric is gone. It's been developed, it's been demolished, and there are much, you know, there are greater areas of vacant lots, and so this provides a different opportunity. So certainly, rehabbing existing homes is a very important strategy, and infilling vacant land with housing is important. But you know, where existing historic homes remain, we think it's very important to preserve that, because that really is the heart of the character of this area. But then when we think of the vacant land, there's lots of opportunities to begin to make small public space improvements, small parks, pocket parks, little mid-block parks, which can begin to provide a framework for new housing opportunities. So we'll get into some of the implications of that in just a moment, but you know, thinking of how to strategically place these throughout the neighborhood to not only provide green space and beautification, but also to actually serve as a catalyst and a framework for housing development and providing different types of housing, a greater diversity of housing that can support different populations, like people who want to stay in the neighborhood and age in place, but don't necessarily want to take care of, you know, a large home on a large lot. And then the third strategy is really, how do we reconnect the community to some of the key surrounding amenities? So thinking of connections, for instance, to the Ville, which is a very important neighborhood, and you know, is on the other side of MLK, which has been identified in the citywide planning as a key commercial corridor that the city is going to focus on as part of its equitable economic development strategy. And so thinking of the opportunity of MLK as kind of a seam and a connector between the Vandeventer and Covenant Blue Grand Center neighborhoods and the Ville and the Greater Ville, Jeff Vanderloo to the north, with strategic infill opportunities along that commercial corridor. And then thinking of, again, the street network and how we connect into Lewis Place, east to Grand, south to Lindell, and really bringing, again, that idea of making all of these streets great streets that are beautiful, shaded, easy to walk, safe to bike on, safe to cross, where you don't have speeding cars, and you really just create the framework and the public space of a great neighborhood, which is really defined by the character of its streets. And then finally, in that connection and thinking of an approach to the MLK corridor, there are some major pieces of vacant property along MLK, including what we're showing here between North Sarah and Vandeventer, that may provide an opportunity for a significant neighborhood park. And when we think of neighborhood parks, you know, there are parks like Turner Park, which is a great kind of passive, multi-purpose outdoor space, but it's really not big enough to support significant recreational amenities. And we've heard that having recreational amenities, ball fields, basketball courts, places for active rec to occur in the neighborhood is really important to the community. The neighborhood is well connected to some of the larger regional parks, Forest Park, et cetera, but there aren't kind of those opportunities for walkable recreation facilities within the neighborhood. And so as we think about this, development of a large park, in this case along MLK, really provides an interesting opportunity to begin to provide an amenity that not only serves the Vandeventer and Covenant Blue Grand Center neighborhoods, but also can become part of that connection strategy to surrounding neighborhoods, and providing an amenity that multiple neighborhoods can share. So these are really kind of the strategies that we've identified based on the community input and the assets analysis and the existing conditions for the preferred framework plan option for revitalization of the North Central area. And it's important too then to think about how these strategies can begin to connect to other key amenities in and around the neighborhood, and thinking of those citywide and regional connections, which are so critical to achieve some of the goals dealing with job opportunities, for instance, and connections to regional educational resources, employment resources, et cetera. And this neighborhood is really well served by transit. There are a number of bus lines that go through the area that connect to a number of places. In our conversations and interface with Metro, they are looking at even improving that to improve the connectivity between Cortex and the NGA site. Obviously, the Midtown and sort of Central Corridor with SLU, Harris Stowe, BJC, Cortex, these are all right kind of at the doorstep of the community. And so, beginning to support those connections, work to improve transit accessibility, and within the context not only of some of these major educational and employment centers, but also within the context of some of the major commercial corridors that have been identified, commercial corridors and commercial nodes that have been identified in the city's planning, is very important. And so this plan for the neighborhood begins to then reach out, and these strategies operating within the neighborhood begin to reach out and build these connections to surrounding amenities and assets. So what we'd like to do now is we would like to talk about some of the key concepts that we've highlighted in the overall framework plan discussion, and look at what the physical implications of those concepts are in greater detail, because this is important to begin to help to visualize what this means. It's easy to look at these colored zones on a map, but what does this mean? What does it look like on the ground for the neighborhood? So we'd like to go through these concepts, some of these concepts now, and show you some examples of how this could begin to actually impact the physical and public space of the planning area. And so before we go through, the key concepts that we'd like to talk about, housing affordability and wealth building, great streets and greenways, residential parks, celebrating historic and civic buildings, looking at mixed use infill opportunities for the arts district, and then talking a little bit more about organizing for success and what that neighborhood development organization could be. So starting with housing affordability and wealth building. this is really the general strategy that has been identified for the residential portion of the neighborhood. And this begins to really utilize the concept of what's called the missing middle housing. And so if anyone's not familiar with that term, when we think of housing types within neighborhoods, you typically tend to have either detached single family homes, or you have kind of what is called here mid-rise, but it's really, apartment buildings, 2 or 3 story multifamily apartment buildings. You don't typically have a lot of, at least in new development, a lot of unit types within that. And that's what's referred to as the missing middle. This includes things like duplex homes, fourplexes, courtyard buildings, cottage courts, townhouses, little multiplex apartments, things like that. And the reason why this is important is because this diversity of housing type can really help to improve and provide affordable housing within neighborhoods. It can also serve as a wealth building tool, which we'll talk about more in just a minute. And it can provide a diversity of housing types for residents at different stages of their life. Maybe young residents who are just starting out, just moving into their first home, or older residents who want to stay in the neighborhood but don't want to have to take care of a single family house. So when you think of kind of neighborhoods, population changing, you think of trying to maintain a diversity of income levels and affordability, diversity of different household characteristics, family types, et cetera. Successful neighborhoods employ a variety of these housing types, and particularly in this missing middle housing. And what's also important about this is that this really can be a defining characteristic of what the neighborhood is like from a physical standpoint, and what the homes are like. And North Central already has a pretty good diversity of housing types within its boundaries. We've sort of mapped out all of the existing housing using the missing middle kind of housing classifications. And as you can see, you've got cottage courts, you've got townhomes, and small multiplex apartments and duplexes. And in many cases, the duplexes look just like a single family house. So it's all very kind of compatible set of building types that provides a good variety, but within a very residential character. And so, there are a number of single family homes, but there's a number of these other types of housing units as well. And when we begin to think about what these things look like, again, as you can see, there's quite a wide range. And one of the really great things, for instance, about duplex housing is that you can get slightly higher density. You can get slightly smaller units that might appeal to different family types, but they look like single family residences. And if the owner lives in the duplex, then that second unit becomes a potential source of income. Same thing about what are called here as ADUs. That means accessory dwelling units. This is like the traditional granny flat or alley house. It's basically a small house that's on a property, but it's a secondary unit. There are lots of opportunities. Some of these are being built in and around the area now, but there's lots of opportunities. And so as we think of housing infill, we feel it's important to begin to think about what type of housing that is. and to begin to have a variety of housing that can respond to specific parts of the neighborhood to meet the demographic characteristics and some of the market demand that exists in this neighborhood and among you as the community. Thinking of this idea of great streets and greenways, we decided to look at a particular focus area. This is along Pendleton Avenue, where the Hodiamont tracks cross, and so this will be the future site of the Hodiamont Greenway. And so, looking at the existing characteristics of this area, you think about the streets, narrow sidewalks, sometimes inconsistent sidewalks. You don't have consistent street trees. The Hodiamont tracks are just basically a wide alley. You've got a number of vacant lots, some areas of new infill housing. And so when we then begin to think about how to bring in this concept of great streets and greenways to this area and improvements to the street infrastructure itself, and looking, for instance, at Enright, which is quite a wide street, and the potential section of Enright, this street is wide enough to do a planted median down the center with street trees. So you can get, looking at the existing section on the top versus the proposed on the bottom, having nice wide tree lawns on both sides that can support large street trees, a median in the middle, narrowing the street at the corners to provide shorter crossing distances. Pardon me. Looking at the greenway itself and how that ultimately will be developed. And then, thinking of, what some of these elements look like. So intersection bump outs, mid-block crosswalks, medians, these are all important public realm improvements that can really help to beautify and improve the walkability of these streets and create that sense of a great, comfortable, beautiful neighborhood. And then, thinking of residential infill types in this particular part of the neighborhood, is characterized by single family homes and duplexes. So thinking of similar types of infill housing on existing vacant lots. And then, looking at the Hodiamont Greenway, again, there's a great opportunity here to really create a beautiful kind of bicycle and pedestrian thoroughfare through the neighborhood. And of course, this is currently under designed with GRG, and we're showing one potential solution that's has a lot of good tree coverage, still provides access to some of the properties that back up to it. But thinking of some of the particular design elements of these kind of mid-block greenways, some of the conceptual designs that have come out of the planning process. And then, thinking of this idea of alley houses and how, as the Hodiamont Greenway is built, it really becomes just a great amenity that people might want to live right next to. They don't want it in their backyard, they want it in their front yard. And so, what is the opportunity for existing homeowners to build an alley house in their backyard and have that as a separate residence? Again, that could be another unit on their property that could provide income, and really just provides a diversity of housing types and a great place to live that faces this wonderful amenity of the Hodiamont Greenway. In the framework plan, we talked again about this idea of these small kind of residential parks within the neighborhood. And so, you can see one of the examples here. This is an area between Cook Avenue and CD Banks. And interestingly, this is an area right now where there is a large amount of vacant land. There's a huge area of parcels fronting basically 4 streets that are completely vacant. And the few buildings that are scattered around, many of them are vacant or derelict. Some of them are, in really poor condition. Another interesting aspect of this particular location, and there's an artist at Washington University who's currently doing a project on this, looking at these two properties at 4004 and 4008 Cook Avenue. This was actually the site of some armed resistance in 1912 by African American residents of the neighborhood against against segregationists rather. And so this provides an interesting kind of historical moment within the neighborhood as well. That's part of the neighborhood's cultural history. And so when we think about this area. And the opportunity then to begin to build one of these small kind of residential park interventions. What this does, it does a couple of key things. Number one, it provides a beautiful green space in the neighborhood that can support and serve the surrounding homes. It also provides a mid-block crossing of what is otherwise a very long block. So it helps to improve the walkability and the accessibility through the neighborhood. And then it provides a great amenity around which you can build, again, some different types of housing. So in this case, we're showing the opportunity for actually having parcels at the ends of the block that face the park that can be built as townhomes. And so you get a potential for a series of sort of narrow attached homes. They're single family homes, but it's a different housing type. Might be more suited for a young family or an aging resident or aging couple that might want to move out of a larger home. But again, thinking of ways to provide this variety of housing types and housing infill in the neighborhood, and to begin to structure that housing around some key neighborhood amenities. Again, taking a similar approach, but really focusing it around historic buildings. So in this case, we're looking at Scruggs Memorial Church. This is a key congregation that's been in the community really since the 1870s. Their current building from the 1920s. Located right along North Spring, where the Brickline Greenway is going to be coming through, and again surrounded by a lot of vacant property. So this seemed to be a great opportunity with, through a little bit of reconfiguration, moving Red Fox Lane over a little bit, creating a new street, being able to develop a lovely kind of town green with the church as a centerpiece, and then using that as a framework to develop, again, some different housing infill types. And then finally, moving over to the east side of the neighborhood within the Arts District and thinking about the opportunities for mixed use infill that this higher density area can support. And this is looking at, between sort of Del Mar and Samuel Shepherd Drive. And, again, lots of vacancy, lots of parking lots, sort of underdeveloped land. And this becomes an area not only for some key streetscape improvements to streets like, major thoroughfares like Del Mar, but being able to provide some of these mixed use multifamily developments that really respond to the opportunities of the Arts District, providing, ground floor gallery space, maker space, live work units, retail, and setting this up within a great kind of vibrant streetscape and public realm. And thinking about, how these improvements can be made to really take what is now kind of an underdeveloped area with a lot of vacancy and transform it into a very vibrant amenity within the neighborhood. And then finally, organizing for success. When we think about this idea of the community development organization, and this was something that we shared at the last meeting as we think about how the plan sort of moves from the core values to the vision statement, the goals, the principles, the strategies. and then beginning to set up those implementation priorities and the specific organizational structure that supports the activities and the partnerships and the implementation projects. This is where that community development organization really comes into play. And so we think that, establishing a unified community-based governance entity for all portions of the North Central Plan area west of North Spring Street, basically that entire residential area, typically referred to as a CDC or a community-based development organization. And then, how do we fund it? What's the funding entity? So is there for instance, a coterminous community-based funding entity like a community improvement district that can raise revenues? And these types of organizations can do all different things. They can provide community programs and services to residents. They can partner with the city to provide financial resources like home repair funds, purchase and land bank derelict properties, consolidate properties for development, and they can even get into active development opportunities like issuing requests for proposals, reviewing development proposals with the support of your elected alderpersons, and working with neighborhood institutions, banks, and grantors to develop funding sources for projects. So, these organizations can run the range from kind of community programming organizations to very sophisticated development organizations. But regardless of the track that takes, having this organization as kind of the owner, the holder, and the cheerleader of the plan, basically the group that wakes up every day and says, our primary focus is implementing the North Central Plan, is a really important resource. So that was a lot of information to go through, and that brings us to the end of our preferred option framework plan presentation. So thank you very much, and I'd like to pass it back to Laura.
Thank you, Tim. There's a lot of information, but it was comprehensive information. So thank you for that overview of the preferred option. So now to get your juices stirring even more, we have a little interactive poll for you to take. It is an 8-question poll. Please use the next 2 to 3 minutes to answer the questions on the screen. And us panelists can't vote. Give you another 30 seconds or so. This is your initial reaction, particularly to the key concepts that Tim just presented. Okay, Chandra, you can show the results whenever you want to. Okay, great. So I'll just go through the responses quickly, and then we will answer your questions and read out loud your comments you have about the preferred option. So the first key concept was housing affordability and wealth building. How important is this concept to you? The majority of you said it was very important or important. The next key concept was about great streets and the Greenway. And this was still the 66% important, very important, with others saying it's somewhat important, 1/3 saying that. Regarding the key concept of residential parks, let's see, about 70% of you said it was important or very important. Celebrating historic and civic buildings, this concept. 77% of you said it was important. The Arts District as a mixed-use infill, how important is this concept to you? 45% said important to very important, but most of you were pretty neutral, somewhat important, not important for this particular key concept. And then we move to organizing for success, this key concept, how it can all happen. And 83% of you feel it's important or very important. Which one describes your knowledge of a community development corporation? So 39% of you are somewhat knowledgeable, not knowledgeable, but 61% of you are very knowledgeable in this area. No one was neutral on Community Development Corporation. And then the last question was really taking your pulse on how satisfied are you with the recommendations that Tim just presented of the preferred option? Do you agree or disagree? And 72% of you strongly agree or agree. And the rest of you were just about neutral on the preferred option. So that gives you an initial reaction to what people feel about the key concepts and the preferred option overall. Now we will answer your questions or comments about the preferred alternative. And we have one about the preferred alternative, and then another one that goes back to the principles and strategies that we talked about earlier. So this first question is about investing in local businesses that are owned and operated by residents in the area. So how will this plan speak to the need for investing in local businesses owned and operated by people living in the North Side? Tim, what type of urban planning does this plan address to strategically balance business and residential living in our area?
Right. So that is one of the key principles that has come out of our work so far, developed both from input from the community as well as the continued input and interface with the steering committee. There are a couple of items that have been mentioned specifically relative to that. Number one, the importance of having a good balance between local residents and local businesses. What's typically referred to as kind of a sustainable jobs housing or business housing balance. So when you think of strong neighborhoods, they have a mix, and making sure that proportion between the two is right is very important. The second is really then looking to identify opportunities for programs that can help to incentivize or otherwise support small businesses through a variety of means. And there are a variety of programs available that can do that, funding sources that can do that from a variety of different entities. So there's state sources, federal sources, there are not-for-profits in the area that can provide that kind of funding. The city has limited funding for commercial district improvements and improving storefronts and things like that. And there are lots of opportunities that organizations like the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, organizations like Rankin, and educational training organizations provide that can provide that support, provide business incubator space and things like that. So as we move forward and we continue to gather your feedback through the principles and strategies exercise, we will be working to kind of build out potential opportunities for those programs, and we'll also be working to identify all of those various regional and even statewide and national partners that can provide those types of resources. But making those programs available to residents who want to start businesses in the neighborhood, or making resources available to existing businesses in the neighborhood who want to stay but who might need a little bit of help. That's an important concept of the plan, and one that will be continuing to develop as the planning process continues.
Thank you. And the next question is about different types of programs, in particular training and retraining programs for the unemployed. And this person says it depends on creating a bridge across that Delmar divide if these proposed partnerships are to succeed. How will this plan and strategies accomplish this?
So that's a really good question, and I think one of the keys to this is going to be working to develop those strategic relationships with partners. So one example of one of these types of programs that you may be familiar with is the Met Center in Wellston, the Metropolitan Education and Training Center. And this is an initiative of the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, and I believe Rankin Tech is part of that. They are part of that, and there are some other educational and training institutions that are part of that. But basically, what it is it's a facility where a lot of these places are co-located. And they offer various educational programs. They offer daycare services for students who need childcare during the day. It's a variety of programs, everything from sort of high school equivalency education to particular training programs, job skills training, helping counseling and helping people with technology, resume writing, all sort of a comprehensive, multifaceted approach to getting people job ready and helping them to enter the job market and connect with employment opportunities. So that's an organization that already exists, and is but obviously is not located particularly conveniently to this neighborhood. So thinking of how something like that, whether it's a satellite of that particular organization or it's a similar organization, thinking of the opportunities, for instance, that Cortex, Rankin, BJC, some of the other institutions that are immediately surrounding the area, SLU, Harris Stowe, State University, et cetera, and beginning to work with them and work with other established partners to begin to develop those resources. And I think the concept of the Met Center is a great precedent for this, whether they themselves are involved or something like it is developed. That's one opportunity for those types of programs. But certainly the issue of the Delmar divide is very important, and I think one of the things that we're particularly trying to do is to think of how how this particular community, this planning area, can connect to some of the resources south of Delmar in the central corridor that are just adjacent, and what types of resources and opportunities those institutions can bring to the table to help improve job readiness and connect residents with sustainable, good paying jobs. And also, looking at opportunities or for partners with organizations like Rankin, which is, just sort of in and just next to the neighborhood, and does a lot of that type of work as well. So
this next question is about gardens. There are community leaders who've created gardens, and someone is creating a new park in the area. Will Joshua of Washington University assist and join them with program leaders already started? With programs leaders have already started, excuse me.
Possibly, I don't know. But I think that we definitely, in general, the idea that we would want to capitalize on any of that work, that grassroots work that's already occurring in the neighborhood is very important. So we do recognize that there are a number of those types of things that have grown up organically within the community. Supporting those is important. That's an important partnership to build. We've identified some others that I think are worthy of consideration, but maybe they're not as feasible in exactly the way that we've drawn them at this point. But in principle, this idea of, number one, partnering with existing community institutions and churches. Number two, partnering with residents who are already doing this type of work. Number three, identifying historical resources within the community and celebrating those as part of the community's history, but also as opportunities for how the plan can be developed. That's kind of the strategy that the plan will pursue in how these particular interventions, be they parks or gardens, or other amenities, are thought of and built.
Thank you. This next question: to organize for success, how do I work to get my organization or people on my street updated about the plan's next steps? Good.
And Larna, you please feel free to provide your insight on this as well. But there is the project website, yes, which has information. There are also Facebook pages and other social media outlets for that. But we will be continuing to update those materials. Or those sources with materials. This presentation will go up as well as the recording of the meeting. And I think, though, one of the most important things to do, even though that repository of information exists about the plan, we would ask you to please talk to your neighbors, tell your neighbors, ask them to visit the website, look at the materials, get involved, because that's really important. It's one thing for someone to get a postcard in the mail about a project, and that's not to suggest that that's not an important way of communicating with people, but it's much more impactful if your neighbor comes to you and says, you need to check this out, you need to provide your input. So
the theory is that you are more likely to take action when you hear information from someone you know and respect. So that's why all of you who are here tonight, thank you for being here, but we also need you to take it to the next step, which is getting your organization or people on your street involved, making them aware that this planning process is taking place, and then getting them to give their input, going to the website. We know it's been a challenge for us with COVID-19 and wanting to get the information out and people engaged, but being safe at the same time. But that's why we have the website, the social media. I put my email address in the chat room, which is lgodwin@vectorstl.com. If you want to follow up with me, and we'll get the rest of the team together as to how we could help you get the word out. If there are other materials, if you need us to print something that you would like to send out to your neighbors, if that helps, we're willing to do that, because this is your plan. It's not our plan. We're basically facilitating the whole process that is built on assets and strengths in your community. So we need you then to not only give your feedback, so we create a plan that represents what you want, but to get your neighbors' feedback as well. So thank you for that question. Those of you who are willing to take that next step, wanting to take that next step to get the word out and get people involved, again, there is my email address, lgodwin@vectorstl.com. Contact me, get my team together, and we will help you do that and provide any hard copy materials you may need or anything else. Or if you give us a list of telephone numbers and people to call, we'll do that as well on your behalf. So thank you for that question. And I see, as I look at what has been sent in, that this is a suggestion from someone, maybe street signs at major intersections of the neighborhood would help.
Absolutely, that's a great idea.
Yes, thank you for that idea, and we will implement that idea. So any other suggestions? Please type them in, send it to us, and we will follow up for sure. So another question, Tim. It's been suggested to have a YMCA and an international youth hostel along or near the Del Mar corridor. Is that a viable idea to the area with these new resources?
So, yeah, no, those are great suggestions, and I know that those, if I remember correctly, even in the early stages of the engagement process, we had received those suggestions. I will say that, you know, a facility like a YMCA can be challenging to implement, because they are, you know, it's as far as a project goes, it is quite expensive. You know, this is true really of any kind of community center, and so, you know, we would want to really explore how that would fit into kind of the broader context of those types of facilities in and around the area, and other, you know, community centers. Like there's obviously the YMCA up in O'Fallon Park. There's the Wool Community Center in Sherman Park, and, you know, there are some other facilities. So just to be perfectly honest, you know, evaluating the feasibility of something like that is a broader conversation, you know, thinking of how does that work within the context of those types of facilities in a broader area. You know, something like a youth hostel, though, you know, that can be done on a smaller scale, and is potentially quite compatible. And it's really a matter of kind of who funds it and who operates it. But, you know, that's something that can certainly happen on on a much smaller scale and can happen more incrementally. But all of those types of resources are part of the consideration. At this point, what we're really trying to formulate and what this framework plan preferred option is trying to illustrate is what's the approach to operating in the neighborhood. What are kind of the principles and the concepts that the North Central Plan is developing, and how will those be employed and implemented in the community. The next phase of the work is really about identifying potential projects and being more particular about what does commercial infill on North Sarah look like? What does housing infill or specific projects along Delmar look like? What do these parks actually look like, and where specifically do they go? What do the greenway improvements along key streets look like? So we've started to get into that as we had shown tonight, as more of a way to begin to test some of these concepts and see. But as we move forward, now we'll be looking much more in depth at opportunities for specific projects, where those can go and how those can be conceived of.
Which segues into the next question, and you answered it a little bit, and that is, what is the time frame for this taking place? So when someone ask that question, to me, it's, when am I going to see changes in my neighborhood?
Yes, so that's always an important question, and I think it's important to remember that that a project, a plan like this, a neighborhood-wide plan, really in this case, covering 2 neighborhoods. This is something that is going to take a number of years to be fully implemented, and it's going to come about because of a number of different projects that are all building together. So, there are certain aspects of this that are already moving forward, like the greenways, and there are other aspects that I think can move forward as projects, and most likely will move forward as projects. Things like, could a developer come in and do the small residential park with townhomes surrounding it? Absolutely. That's something that a developer could come in and do as a project. What I think is most important about this type of a plan is setting up the framework for that implementation to occur, and giving the community the tools to be able to guide that implementation, and actually capitalize on and access resources that are available. And so that's why we feel that the Community Development Organization, the CDC, is such an important part of this, because that's going to empower the residents to work both with the institutional partners in the city of St. Louis, as well as to really potentially take on projects themselves as an organization, that will all contribute to the implementation of the plan. And without that organizational framework, it's difficult to continue to work incrementally over time to realize the whole vision. It really takes kind of a community-led but overarching group that's really 100% focused on this community and making this community plan a reality.
Tim, also go through the proposed timeline to complete the plan and hand it off
Sure.
to the city.
No, that's good too. Yeah. So in terms of the plan completion, and we are, just to be perfectly transparent, we are in the process of actually finalizing some of these dates now. But in principle, we are the plan will be completed in the spring of this year. So in the next several months. In terms of the process for actually completing the plan, we will be working with the community at large. In fact, we have one more of these town hall meetings that will occur as part of the process. It will occur later in the spring. So we'll be working to complete the document. We'll also be working with the steering committee to complete the document. And once the plan document is complete, then it'll be submitted to the city of St. Louis for adoption as a what's called a topical plan for a neighborhood. That process, that adoption process is important because once the plan is adopted, it becomes part of the city's overall plan, what's known as the city's comprehensive plan. So that means that when development projects come up in the city, come before the planning commission will reference this plan when they're reviewing the projects, and they'll evaluate the projects as to whether or not they are in line with the plan or not. And we are anticipating at this point that adoption of the plan will occur during this summer at some point. So we're I would say roughly about halfway, or maybe a little more than halfway through the process, but definitely within the next few months, the plan will be complete, and within by middle to end of summer, the plan hopefully should be adopted by the city. And that's not to say that implementation of the plan can't start earlier than that, or certainly can start before the city adoption. But that's kind of the general time frame that we're looking at for having this all complete and finalized as a plan.
Another question is this part of the reason LRA won't sell some of the lots on Evans?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't believe so. We've not we've had a meeting with LRA. We've gotten their input on the work of the plan to date. We've not we've had no specific conversations about particular properties or anything like that. So I don't think that this has anything to do with that decision. I think that must be an internal LRA decision,
Yeah.
but I couldn't speak for LRA on that.
This person also wrote that the city owns these lots, but say they are privately owned, and city workers cut these lots on Evans.
We can certainly look into, if you have addresses of the lots, we could certainly look into that. But yeah, I'm not aware that this planning process has any impact on that issue.
The next comment is, this person says, my father and I live in the North Central area, but we didn't receive information about this town hall meeting. How do I get on the mailing list? Because we did send out a postcard, a direct mailer. I don't know exactly, you said the North Central area, so I don't know exactly where you live in the area, but we sent out a mailer, we did social media. Please go to our website at northcentralstlplan.com and sign up to be on our mailing list. We also sent out an e-blast as well. But please go and get your friends and neighbors, as we discussed earlier, to sign up on our website. And then Tim, they also had a second question that they want to get more information about H3 Studio. So if
Okay.
you email me, I put my email address in there, I will connect you to Tim. Okay, so here's some more questions. Is it possible at this point of the process to have a spokesperson from each block unit added to the committee that was established?
So I'm going to have to unfortunately defer, and we can definitely get you information on this. I'm going to have to defer to the Deaconess Foundation on this question. I don't know if they are available tonight on the meeting to answer this. I do know that the steering committee, the formulation of the steering committee was done by the Deaconess Foundation, and that the goal was to have a representative body kind of covering all portions of the neighborhood and covering all of the various stakeholders and residents. And there are representatives from some of the block groups and other organizations that are serving on the steering committee. Again, at this point, I don't know if it's possible to add additional members, since we only have one more meeting with the group. My thought is that probably isn't possible. However, we do want to make sure that you're getting information, that you're able to provide us with your feedback. So we'll need to talk to the Deaconess Foundation about how best to do that. But certainly maintaining that transparency, maintaining engagement with all sectors of the neighborhood, and making sure that there's an open line of communication between the planning team and you all is very important. So let us follow up with the Deaconess Foundation on that and see how to best address that concern.
Because there's another comment that I will read. It was a surprise to many in the community that this group/committee was formed without coming to the many block unit/neighborhood groups. So I wanted to read out loud that comment in the spirit of transparency. The LRA, someone wants to provide their email address. Lord Jin, G-I-N-N, who is a vacancy strategist at LRA, please feel free to email me about the Evans properties. She admits that she doesn't know anything about it right now, but is willing to look into it for you. And her address is in the chat room. It is Ginny with a G-I-N-N-I at stlewis-mo.gov. And that is in the chat room, her email address as well. And I think I'll wait just a minute. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? I have read and asked everything that we've received thus far, but I just want to wait a minute and give anyone else an opportunity. We do have about 8 minutes left to respect your time. We said it would be from 6 to 8. Welcome any ideas, other ideas you have about getting the word out to people. Okay, this is greetings from the 18th Ward Committee woman, Yolanda Yogi Yancey. And she asked, when will the next Zoom update be? And that was going to be in my concluding remarks, that we are looking at spring sometime. We don't have an exact date yet, but we will let you know, and hopefully the weather will be better and we'll be able to get out, at least be outside. So it can be, as you're saying, Committeewoman Yancey, be more interactive for those viewing and participating. It does make a difference. And particularly tonight, there was a lot of information. So that is our goal, to have it in the spring. And then here is another name that you can call that's coming through, Audrey Ellerman of the Covenant Blue Grand neighborhood, who is also co-chair of the steering committee. She said to give her name out if you're willing to, she's willing to talk to you, help get the word out. So again, if you email me, my email address is in the chat room. Email me your comments and questions. I'll forward them to the right person and we will respond. Here's a question, Tim. Another question. Are there any safety plans along with our development?
Yeah, so, again, this is when we think of safety, there are a number of ways to address that. So for instance, one of the goals is to help to improve safety through physical design, through streetscape improvements, and dealing with some of the vacant properties and other areas of the neighborhood that currently, because of the existing conditions, attract undesirable or problematic activities. But beyond that, we are also looking, and again, this is just to kind of reiterate what we've said a couple times tonight, this is where your input as residents on the principles and the strategies is really instrumental, because there is a big programming component to that as well. So, we are very interested in getting ideas that you all might have in terms of opportunities for partnerships or other programs that can be used to improve safety. And certainly we are also working on that through our knowledge of the area and analysis. So, ensuring that we're partnering with the various city agencies, other stakeholders, institutional partners, et cetera, to put together a comprehensive safety strategy for the area. But yes, that is something that is part of the final plan.
And I think those are all the comments and questions, Tim, for this evening. So thank you everyone for attending tonight's virtual town hall meeting. The presentation will be on our website at northcentralstlplan.com, but give us until Thursday, February 4th to download it and make sure it looks good, not editing. It'll be the straight what you saw tonight, but we just need to download it first and make sure that it's okay and put it up on the website. So by this Thursday, it will be up on the website along with a comment form. And again, the website address is northcentralstlplan.com. Also, please go to our website under the feedback tab, to find the principles and strategies exercise that we talked about earlier. Remember, no strategy is off the table. So whatever you think, ideas you have, please list them. Please list them. Finally, as was just asked, and I mentioned that we will have another community-wide meeting to present the final draft North Central Plan. We hope to have that in the spring so we can be outside and be more interactive with you, and hopefully more people will attend. So again, that meeting will be held sometime this spring and we will let you know. Thanks so much for participating this evening. Be safe and have a great rest of your evening.